Somebody asked me, do you feel that Albania now is a part of the world? It was a surprise for me, this question. And I answered him that, do you feel that the world is world without Albania? But in the same time, I felt the inferiority for my nation. Or somebody asked me, where is Albania? I never have heard something for Albania or Albanian peoples. But I don't feel inferiority like a person, no. I feel broken. And it's very difficult to me to get all my parts to be one, to begin from the beginning. It's a sadness here.
Ajo tinte si duronte, poi scullesh infelice, te ti jubën mal me njerë, e toka te t'melon.
You have seen the ships crowded with Albanians trying to go to Italy, a horrible scene. And the first thing when you say to someone, I'm Albanian, they have this image. And why is it important to be Albanian? Sometimes maybe it's not important if you have this image, but it's important on the other hand because you cannot do otherwise, and you have to develop your country in order that when you say I'm Albanian, they have another image in their head, and not these ships only. You see that they don't accept you as a citizen of the world. They treat you as an Albanian. What are you? What's your identity? What have you done?
Si ata ti qesheruan, kjo është vetëm nisja juaj, por do rritesh do kuptosh, se fatet s'janë njësoj.
Land of Albania, let me bend mine eyes on thee, thou rugged nurse of savage men. The cross descends, thy minarets arise, and the pale crescent sparkles in the glen, through many a cypress grove within each city's ken.
Albania has been, during 5 centuries, under Turkish occupation and somehow was lost as a national identity. And during the collapse of Turkish Empire, some Albanians thought that they should create the Albanian state. So in 1912, it came the time to proclaim the Albanian independence. And you must know a very important thing, that 50 years of this time has been under the communist system, under the communist ideology. So Albania had not enough time to develop somehow, being an independent state, its cultural identity, because our symbols were the symbols of Marxist-Leninist ideology. And now, with collapse of that ideology, Albania is under a crisis of identity.
L'Albanie vient de sortir de cette cauchemar, parce que elle vient de sortir du stalinisme. Les autres pays de l'Est, ils sont sortis du post-stalinisme. Et ça, il ne faut pas oublier jamais. Et même pour la culture ou pour l'aspect politique des Albanais, ce n'est pas la même chose sortir directement du stalinisme vers la démocratie et sortir du post-stalinisme. Parce que la Tchécoslovaquie, l'Hongrie, les autres, pour eux, Staline, il était mort 1953. Pour nous, il est mort il y a quelques années auparavant, parce que notre dictateur, Enver Hoxha, c'était la même chose que Staline.
Quand j'étais à prison, plusieurs fois, mon ami m'avait fait des questions. Max, mais quand tu penses que crôler le communisme? Alors moi, je pensais, et je dis à eux, à 2020. Et dans un moment, tout est croulé. Comme une vieille maison qui croulait. C'est d'écrouler, comme ça, écrouler le communisme.
Morn dawns, and with it stern Albania's hills. Here roams the wolf, the eagle whets his beak. Birds, beasts of prey, and wilder men appear, and gathering storms around convulse the closing year. Certatim soci feriunt mare, et aequora verum. Eagerly rowed my comrades, sweeping the sea with long strokes. Soon were the lofty peaks of Corcyra lost to view. We coasted along Epirus, and coming to the Chaonian harbour, we drew near Butrint, that hill city.
Our immediate interest and curiosity in Butrint was sparked off by my having lived in Corfu for 25 years with the most wonderful of maritime views right across to Albania and Butrint in particular. Having learnt about the place, read about the place, you can imagine what I felt. The regime there changed, and I was able to go across. And once I'd gone across, this jewel was an even more beautiful jewel than I could possibly have ever expected it to be. I mean, the urge, the wish to do something about it, the archaeological site, was an overwhelming one. So we formed the Butrint Foundation with Lord Sainsbury and signed our agreement.
And you've got to sign the Albanian one too.
Right.
If you would.
Albania desperately needs good tourist development, economic progress. And the important thing is that that site is well treated in heritage terms, that the whole area of natural beauty around it is conserved, that it isn't ruined by mass tourism. We are digging up a nation's past, and of course we should do that hand in hand with the Albanian government, so it's a joint venture. It is one of the great wonders of the Mediterranean.
Quand quelqu'un traverse la porte de Butrinti, il entre dans un autre monde. C'est un monde lié avec toute l'histoire de l'Albanie. À partir de la porte commence l'histoire de presque 2500 ans, on peut sentir les diverses époques, l'époque archaïque, hellénistique, classique, romain, byzantine et jusque presque contemporain. Je vais ajouter quelque chose. Les gens qui connaissent un peu la mythologie, ils savent bien que nous sommes déjà dans le territoire du au-delà. Pour parler d'Albanie d'aujourd'hui, il faut que vous imaginez qu'il a passé pas mal de siècles avec des changements très fréquents du pouvoir. L'Albanie était un carrefour pas seulement des pouvoirs, mais un carrefour des cultures, des civilisations. Mais notre patrimoine était avec beaucoup de vide. L'archéologie est en train de jouer son vrai rôle pour découvrir notre histoire.
Butrint was a city that lived for 2 millennia and has a changing history throughout that period. Butrint was a small colony in the archaic Greek period, that is roughly around 500 BC, grew into a larger city during the Roman period, very large city in late antiquity, that is around 500 AD, and then a much smaller town, port, after that. The heyday was probably around 500 AD, the time of the Emperor Justinian. It would have been full of people from all over the Roman Empire, from North Africa, from the Eastern Empire, from Italy. There would have been a sense of a cosmopolitan port. There would have been a sense of a great deal of mercantile activity.
What I would do is actually just try and clean it up as much as possible.
Yeah. You can walk through these woods and encounter monuments of different periods and encounter that sequence, that palimpsest of the past, and get some sense of how the past changed and worked and wasn't one straight line until it collapsed at some particular point in time. The past has all these different layers to it. The past is as complex and complicated as the present.
"40 miles across the Adriatic Sea from Italy, perched between great mountain peaks, is Tirana, capital of the youngest, smallest kingdom in the Balkans, home of the 41-year-old bachelor king Zog, Z-O-G, the first.
Le personnage de roi Zog, c'est un personnage vraiment très controversé en Albanie. Ou bien il est très très noir, ou bien il est très très glorieux. Vous savez, quand il était venu au pouvoir, il a renversé un pouvoir démocratique en Albanie. Mais malgré ça, au moins, il a fait quelque chose pour l'Albanie parce qu'il a stabilisé le pays. Il a donné une sorte de tranquillité. Il a essayé parfois de faire résistance aux expansions italiennes, malgré ça au commencement, il était ami avec eux. Je suis habitué dans l'école toute ma vie à attendre cette chose-là, c'est-à-dire que le roi Zog a vendu l'Albanie. Mais l'épilogue, c'était que c'est l'Italie qui l'a chassé du pouvoir. C'est l'Italie qui a occupé l'Albanie. Alors, on reproche de lui pourquoi il n'a pas fait la résistance, pourquoi il a abandonné le pays. Mais on ne peut pas dire qu'il a vendu comme ça, parce que les Italiens ils ont proposé à lui qu'il reste comme le roi d'Albanie, mais dans le cadre de l'Empire fasciste. Et il n'a pas accepté.
Today, Italians practically rule the little kingdom. train Albanian school children as the children of Italy are trained. Italian engineers survey broad Albanian valleys, and the world realizes that while Mussolini's right hand grabbed in Ethiopia, his left was snatching for his new empire Little Albania, the primest piece of colonial plunder left in Europe. Time marches on.
In the past, the main excavations were those that were done by Ugolini, an Italian archaeologist, in the late 20s and early 30s, very much part of the fascist era. And the intention was really to illustrate fascist archaeology, great Roman sites outside Italy. The fascists were absolutely entranced by archaeology, and Ugolini's job was to try and uncover as much of the Roman city as possible. He worked on an enormous scale, little railway trains, enormous numbers of workmen and the like, and he's pictured in all his fascist finery observing his workmen digging away to the glory of ancient and then modern Rome.
Oui, je suis de la ville de Girocastra, qui est au sud d'Albanie. J'ai vu tant de choses quand j'étais enfant, parce que j'ai vu l'armée italienne, l'armée grecque, l'armée allemande. Quand la ville s'était occupée par les Italiens, elle était bombardée par les Anglais. Quand elle était occupée par les Grecs, elle était bombardée par les Italiens. L'armée s'est passée, allait passer comme ça plusieurs fois. Pour nous, c'était vraiment comme une sorte de film magnifique.
At dusk, the city, which through the centuries had appeared on maps as a possession of the Romans, the Normans, the Byzantines, the Turks, the Greeks, and the Italians, now watched darkness fall as a part of the German Empire. Utterly exhausted, dazed by the battle, it showed no sign of life.
Until September 43, the country was occupied by Italian troops. So the resistance was fighting against the Italian. When Italian gave up, the Germans occupied the country, and the resistance was directed against the German occupation. In my view, it is one of the most important periods in the history, in the whole history of this country. And let me say, one of the most glorious. Young people, very enthusiastic. I did the same, myself. I was involved in the movement of resistance too. But at the time, our dream was to have the country independent. So it was very attractive for us, this ideal, promoted by the Communist Party.
In Tirana, the capital, Independence Day is being celebrated. 32 years ago, Albania was liberated from the rule of the Turks. But it has been the unfortunate experience of so many small European nations that their periods of independence have often proved no more than breathing space. Sooner or later, some other larger nation comes along to replace their independence with a yoke again. However, now they've been liberated again, and they and we hope for the best.
At the moment of liberation, Albania was a very backward country. The great majority of people, and especially young people, had their dream to see their country more rich, more advanced, and more just. And even I became a member of the Party of Labor here. Very soon I realized that it was disappointing. It was not at all our dream. We cannot deny that during all these periods, amounting up to a half a century, nothing has been done.
The purpose of the present excavations are really to understand the rhythms of this port. It's a 5-year project to look at Byzantine Butrint, roughly 400 to 1400 AD. We've just begun, so we're really feeling our way. We're in search of understanding how Butrint worked as a place, how it functioned as a port, a town on the Straits of Corfu. In other words, we're looking at it as a living place, asking the kind of questions that one asks of any sort of society in these days.
What we've got here is what is known in technical terms as a triconch. That is a large, elaborate reception room with 3 apses, presumably which would have held dining couches where formal receptions could have taken place, and so forth. This would have looked out onto a colonnaded garden, which would have been in this area over to my right, now completely overgrown with trees, and hopefully an area we intend to excavate in a future season.
These walls are all eroded by water. You can see the water, it must be water doing this in limestone. And especially over here, in this corner, there's a massive erosion into the limestone at this point. So the building has something to do with water. We thought long and hard about what it might be, and we now think it might be a mill. That's even more exciting, because basically if you have evidence of production in the Byzantine city, then you can start to talk about people. We'll get the pottery, we'll give it to a ceramic specialist, and she'll be able to say, well, okay, this pottery was produced in Corinth, it was produced in Corfu, so therefore we're talking about trade between these places and Butrint. It gets us to the ordinary person, not just to the elite and the aristocracy, not just to the people who built those things and who lived in those things and who prayed in those things. There were thousands of ordinary people here, but they're totally absent from the kind of archaeological monuments that are being displayed in Butrint at the moment.
C'était un chef communiste classique, il était un dictateur cruel, mais il avait quelque chose d'atypique. Il était un communiste, je crois qu'il n'avait pas les convictions communistes. C'était quelqu'un qui n'était pas comme les autres, les communistes, qui étaient très fidèles aux questions de révolution et très cruels. Et c'est comme ça qu'il avait de temps en temps une sorte d'allure occidentale. Avec cette allure occidentale, il a trompé plusieurs fois beaucoup de monde. Son manière d'habiller, c'était tout à fait européen, comme un bourgeois, avec une borsaline toujours, ce qui était très rare dans l'Est. Je suis sûr qu'il pouvait accepter de devenir archevêque, ou cheikh, ou je sais pas, ou cardinal, sauf qu'il reste au pouvoir.
Kamrit Enver Hoxha is immortal because his work and deed is immortal, because the party which he founded and led is immortal, because present-day Albania which he built is immortal.
The Tabia Sarail, or Palace of Dreams, as it's called in the language of today, is one of our great imperial state's most important institutions. The world has long recognized the importance of dreams and the role they play in anticipating the fates of countries and of the people who govern them. The task of our Palace of Dreams, which was created directly by the reigning Sultan, is to classify and examine not the isolated dreams of certain individuals, but the tabir as a whole. In other words, all the dreams of all citizens without exception. This is a vast enterprise.
I was during that time a student or pretending to become a writer. And after my father was declared enemy of people, then Secret Service found my writings, and I was arrested and condemned for agitation and propaganda against the regime. I was condemned 7 years, but I have done 17 years in prison because I was condemned for the second time being in prison.
Les communistes voulaient même le paysage changer, hein, avec cette bunker, avec ces slogans de pierre partout, avec cette bâtiment sinistre qu'ils ont construit partout. Je crois que ces quarts de million de bunkers sont une pyramide morcelée, répandue dans tout le pays.
Coltivati per terra, che non fruttano niente, che ingialliscono al sole senza avere stagione per raccogliere il grano. Bunker, pronti per combattere una guerra con la fame. Bunker, sembrano segnali fatti in serie per le strade. E li conti, ti confondi e ti perdi, e contando li vedi che abbandonano il suolo, e sono grandi aquile che vibrano.
Jemi në galerinë e arteve kombëtare. Ky është fondi i galerisë arteve dhe këtu janë të ruajtura ato vepra të cilat janë bërë gjatë një periudhe prej 50 vjetësh në Shqipëri. Janë vepra tipike të artit realizmit socialist, të cilat janë tepër të ideologjizuara dhe pjesa më e madhe e tyre nuk përfaqësojnë vlera të vërteta artistike. Sigurisht tematika është një gjë që ishte e detyrueshme për atë kohë dhe gjithë secili piktor dashje pa dashje duhet të përmbajë asaj tematike. Të gjithë këto figura janë imagjinare, thjesht në idenë e njerëzve, janë figura, pjesa më e madhe janë imagjinare.
The life and activity of Kamrit Enver Hoxha is the living history of the Albanian people in these last 50 years.
Kjo është një periudhë nga viti 70-73 deri në vitet 86-87. Është periudha kur në Shqipëri diktatura komuniste arriti maksimumin e saj. Këto janë njerëz kryesisht të deformuar nga jeta, njerëz që kërkojnë ndihmë nga Zoti dhe edhe ndihma e Zotit ishte larg në atë kohë për njerëzit. Këto piktura kanë qenë të gjitha të fshehura në tavanin e shtëpisë time për arsyen se po të kapeshin nga shteti në atë kohë do ishte të mërshme, unë duhet të digjesha, jo të varesha, po duhet digjesha. Kjo quhet dirigjenti. Bën fjalë për udhëheqësin i cili drejtonte popullin sipas interesave të tija personale.
Vous ne pouvez pas comprendre, vous les Algériens, parce que si nous disons à vous que le régime, moi, m'avait condamné pour l'art, vous ne pouvez pas comprendre. Moi, je suis condamné parce que je fais l'art moderne. Expressionisme, abstractionisme, cubisme, duke I u referuar e mbështetur në veprën reaksionare të ekspresionistëve gjerman, në krijimtarinë famkeqe Pablo Picassos, Brakut, Matisit, Kandiskit e tjerë, duke u shkëputur nga jeta, nga problemet, preokupacionet e popullit tonë, nga heroïsmi dhe... Moi, je suis condamné à 10 ans. Moi, j'ai fait de prison dans une lager de Spatch, à nord d'Albanie. C'était, moi, je pense, la plus terrible prison du monde. Il y avait les mines de cuivre, où nous travaillions dans les mines. Il était un régime très fort et très sévère parce que dans cette camp, il était passé en révolte. Ils sont fusillés 4 personnes. J'ai fait des petites vases. Et aussi, c'était une petite spoon pour le thé, pour le thé. Pas pour le thé anglais, mais pour le thé du Spatch. Thé du Spatch.
It's a part of the history of this country, this half a century. And we cannot cancel it, absolutely, it's impossible. It's impossible to cancel it. But we have to put it in the right place. I would say that something has to be rewritten. Something has to be revised, but not thrown away. It would be unjust. Unjust not from the point of view of a certain regime, but from the point of view of the history of the country.
This is the mosaic pavement that floored the early 6th century baptistry. And it's a very fine mosaic pavement. They haven't raised this in 5 years, so this plastic is more than 5 years old. But very often, tourists are coming here and they're beginning to destroy the mosaic because every time they're cleaning it with their foot, going backwards and forwards, they're knocking 1 or 2 of these really delicate stone tesserae. So one of our objectives is to see if we might help in the longer term to do something about the presentation of these mosaics.
We're trying to piece together the whole story of the baptistry so we can actually draw in all the ideas that people have had about the building, how we think they built it, what it actually looked like in the various different phases of its history. But at the same time, we want to look into the future and we want to look at perhaps how the public can come and visit it and how they might be allowed to see the mosaic without destroying it, perhaps by viewing it from above, constructing some kind of structure for preservation around it.
Kjo është bunker, bunker. Bunkeret e Enverit që ka bërë Enveri. Na ka mbrojt 45 vjet. Na ka mbrojt. Na la mbrava botës. Na la mbrava botës. I thym për arsye se jena pa punë, nuk kena nga 3 kalamaj. Të gjerim megrat. To i shezim për bukë, për manxare. Hajmë bukë. Kena mësu shi qytë zotit itarisht. Shala hape portin, kena shpresë për të ha portin. Tiki vënde.
Albania is still a prison, of course in a different level. It's not a feeling of terror, at least, but if people are poor, they cannot be free. If people are ignorant, they cannot be free. I myself, I am a tragic optimist. You know that you have to suffer. You know that maybe you will not realize your aim, but you have to struggle and to go forward. It's the projection of this feeling that I see even the Albanian fate in that way.
Now we are confronting always with different peoples, different cultures, and it's very difficult for us because the Albanian people and the Albanian artists couldn't imagine another world, only the Albanian world.
Se kam qef të Miss Albania, sepse është diçka shumë e bukur të jesh Miss Albania. Është me të vërtet kënaqësi.
You can make maps, we can dig holes, we can record artifacts that we find, but the most difficult thing is to try and reconstruct the mentalities of the people who lived there, which is one of the more interesting things we are supposed to be trying to do as archaeologists. Did people think differently in the past? Almost certainly they did. This is something which is very, very difficult to try and reconstruct. At one time it was believed that the answer could be found, but in a way, the answer alters every generation, and in many cases an attempt to reconstruct what you could call an archaeology of mind is bedeviled by changing philosophies in our own times. Archaeology of the mind is an attempt to reconstruct the thought processes of people in the past, an attempt to understand why they did what they did and how they did it. And trying to get your head around that is extremely difficult. It's difficult to actually conceive of different ways of thinking, organising societies. What we say about the past to some degree reflects a lot more on what we think here in the present than on the past itself.
Do I love Albania? I wanted to write an essay about the love of your country. What does it mean? I love Albania because I love myself, and I cannot be otherwise like an Albanian. I love even my prison somehow, where I was, because it's connected with my history, my life, and just because of that, maybe I love my country, because without that love, I'm nothing. I am connected with this country, with these stones, with that prison, and this is my country, and I love it just because of that, because it's my life there, all. I love this country. I cannot live without this country. I don't know if I gave an answer, because I have to speak in English, and so I don't find the words.
What are these lofty mountains thinking about as the sun sets in the distance beyond the highway? A mountaineer sets out at the fall of night, his long rifle casting 100-mile-long shadow on the ground. This is how you have always set out, Albania, on your long legs and with a long rifle. You wandered without knowing where to go, onward toward the morning full of clouds and mist, grey and ponderous, as though born of night.